Just kind of kicking things off here. Again, kind of going through housekeeping, bit of scheduling. All of your grades should be updated. I updated all the submissions just before class. I just released the grades. Uh, so all of your assignments that you've handed in up to this point should be graded. You should have your feedback back. If you find any problems with it, if you haven't received feedback, just let me know. Shoot me an email. I'll check out what the problem might be. As per usual. So again, all the grades have been submitted. I'm pretty sure I'm up to date on that now. Apart from that, the schedule for this week, we're just kind of following along with the task list from last week. The week 9 and 10 are kind of lumped together. So we're just kind of continuing on. We've talked already last week about blocks. We talked about dimensions on Thursday. Today we're going to kind of expand that just a little bit into some slightly more advanced tools. Nothing too big though. Just the last kind of few things, last few loose ends to kind of tie up here. So I won't kind of talk too much today. This week is going to be kind of light on content. Mostly this week is kind of designed a bit for catch up with assignments. So if you are still working on any of the assignments, assignment 4, 5, or any of the previous ones, this is a good week to kind of catch up. Apart from that, not much else to say. So we're going to cover that chapter 25. I'll share my screen here so I can show the task list. Okay, so again, week 9 and 10 lumped together. We're in week 10 now. We talked about blocks on Tuesday. We talked about dimensions on Thursday. This week, we're going to kind of tie up the last loose ends here. Chapter 25, working with blocks. This is going to go into a bit about editing blocks. If you've created a block and you might have made a mistake and you want to go back and change it. We'll also talk about removing blocks from your diagram. We kind of alluded to it last week a little bit with purging. We'll go into a little bit more depth with that as well. So just kind of general chapter 25 content, as well as practice 12A and 12B. I'll go through those as well, just so you can see a bit of a demonstration of those. So that's pretty much it for today. It's just going to be chapter 25 and then practice 12A, 12B. Rest of the time for today, and then all of the time pretty much for Thursday, are just kind of working periods to catch up on any assignments. Okay? Any questions about what the plan is for this week at all? Okay, if not, we'll get started on chapter 25. We'll talk about that just a little bit. Again, chapter 25 is in the second book. We're not pulling any of the practice problems from there, so you don't need it with you. We're just going to go through the content and kind of describe it. So let me switch over here. So in chapter 25, this is going to be working with blocks. There's just a few extra things we can kind of do with blocks. They might be helpful. They aren't required in terms of the scope of this course, but they might be helpful in your career. So it's a good idea to just kind of mention them, keep them in the back of your head just in case they do come up. Okay. So first thing we're going to talk about is the write block command. So if I go back to my insert tab, last week we talked about blocks, specifically creating blocks. So if I have some clump of objects, various different objects here, let me make sure I'm on the right layer. We're just going to make a fairly generic looking symbol here. Doesn't really mean anything. So this is just a bunch of objects. We talked about last week, if I want to turn this into a block, I go to the Insert tab in the top left here. In my block definition panel, we have Create Block. So Create Block is going to allow me to go through this window, create my block, specify the base point or insertion point of that block. We select the objects that are going to be included in the block. We might change some settings with the behavior and the insertion scale, and we give it a name. So we've kind of talked about that last week. That's generally how you set up a block. When this block is saved, the block itself is saved to the drawing file. So if I create this block on this drawing file and create block, we'll give it a sample symbol name, specify the base point, specify the objects, and just hit OK. So just really quickly going through it and creating the block, same as last week. And this is my sample symbol. This symbol is saved to the drawing file, so if I try to insert it back using the insert gallery here, there's my sample symbol and I can recall it back. But if I go to a different drawing here and try to recall it, it's not included in the gallery. So the block itself is saved to the drawing file. So what if I want to create a block and then maybe I'm just adding this to my kind of block gallery. I'm putting it in a folder on my computer. It's a block I commonly use. Maybe I'm making a design of a symbol for resistors or capacitors, something that shows up very often in my diagrams. Then something I can kind of do to build that library that's going to span across multiple drawing files is to use the write block command. So if I just undo everything I've done here and go all the way back and remake this shape here, so again with my same symbol, in the Insert tab again, block definition panel, I actually have a down arrow little menu for create block. I can switch this to the other command, which is write block. Okay. So again, just an insert block definition, changing this from create block to write block. And what write block is going to do is it's going to give me a little different of a pop-up window here. And what the difference is that create block is going to create a symbol or a block within the drawing file. Write block is going to do the same thing. It's going to save a block to this drawing file, but it'll also allow me to save a drawing file with that block specification on it. So it can kind of make a separate drawing file at the same time, and all that drawing file has it is just that block I created. So then I can then take that drawing file, stick it into a library folder on my computer, and then going back into my insert and my block libraries here, I can recall it from the file at will. Okay. So again, if I'm saving something like a resistor symbol or a capacitor, something I use very often, I can save that as a separate drawing file at the same time as defining the block. And then that can be then put in a folder. I can recall it from that folder at will. Instead of having to, say, make these blocks, different blocks on assignment 5, assignment 6, assignment 7, and then I have to remember in my head, oh yeah, where did I make that fuse symbol? Was that assignment 5 or was that assignment 6? And then you have to kind of sift through different drawing files, figuring out where you made that block exactly. With the write block command, since it saves it as a separate drawing file, you can just stick that in a folder, name it something specific, and then it's really easy to recall back into your block library. Okay, so as a demonstration here, again, similar kind of process. Rather than create block, we're using write block. And when I select that, I get the pop-up window. This one's a bit more condensed. We just have the source. If I want to write a block from an existing block, one that's already in the drawing file. So if I select this, I can choose a block that already exists in this drawing file. I'm using the assignment 5 one because it's probably fairly familiar for most of you, either looking through instructions or a fair few of you have already done it. So this is just kind of an example. I could create that drawing file with the separate block on it from an existing block on this drawing. So something like the fuse symbol, the stop switch, stop or start, the contacts that are already in this drawing. I could use the entire drawing. I could take the entire drawing, turn it into a block, and send it to a drawing file, save it as a drawing file as well. This is for things like control loops, or if you have kind of common ladder logic diagrams. The rungs look the same for multiple different processes. You could save the entire drawing, just draw that portion, that specific control loop, or that specific ladder diagram, save that as a block, and then you could recall the entire drawing as a block at will. We could do the objects. This would be specifying the specific objects on the screen. So when we select objects, this is going to look very similar to create block. Again, I get to choose the base point, and I get to choose the objects included in the block. So by choosing base point here, we can select anywhere on this block or anywhere off of it. I'll select the center point to specify the base point. Selecting the objects, same deal as was with create block. Selecting the objects that will be included in that block and hitting enter. And then I get to choose what happens to that block as well. If the objects are retained, left as individual objects, converted to a block, so all those objects become a block and they're left on my drawing window, or delete them from the drawing and only save them as a file and a block definition in this drawing file. So same as before. The last section here, though, is the destination. So this is where I'm going to save the block to as well. So the block drawing file that I'm going to save, I'll leave this as my desktop here, just so it's easy access. We'll call this sample block.dwg, and I'll hit save. That will send it to my desktop when the block drawing file is saved. And when I hit OK, now I've created this block. Let me go through this again. I think I hit. Let's convert to block. Choose my base point. Let's call it sample 2 instead, so I don't get confused. I think we're all right. Okay, so now I've made that sample 2 block. I've used write block instead of create block. It still does the same thing that create block does, where now I have this block in my gallery here, and I can recall it at will. It's saved to this drawing file, just like create block does. But what I've also done is that if I go to my desktop now, we also have sample 2 here. Ignore the sloth. Sample 2, this new drawing file here, has been saved to my desktop as well. And if I open that up, it's just a drawing with the sample 2 block on it. Okay? So that's all that's on here is just the sample 2 block. Therefore, since I've saved it in this way, if I create any new drawing, so drawing 3 here, I can just very easily go and find that block by going to browsing my block libraries, finding it on my desktop. There's sample 2. I can open that and give it a second to load. And now I can just call that sample 2 block into my drawing. Okay. And then by doing this, I can kind of build up a library of blocks. I can keep saving these as drawing files, put them in some folder that I organize specifically, and then it's very easy to call blocks from other drawings this way. So it might be a good idea if you start a new job and you don't have a big block library, they haven't developed one for you, or they don't have an existing one, you don't have one either. It might be a good idea to go through, just draw a bunch of these basic blocks, draw your resistor symbol, draw fuse symbols, save them as these drawing files, put them all in one folder, and then you can kind of recall them at will into your block libraries very simply like this. Okay? Rather than thinking back, oh, what project was I working on where I made that one block and then I have to figure out which project that was, and then look for the block in that drawing file and recall it each time. Building a block library like this kind of makes the workflow a lot easier, a lot less headache, and a lot quicker for you as well. Okay, so it's just something you can kind of do if you choose. Again, better organization makes you quicker, but it's not a huge requirement. Uh, the downside of not kind of doing something like this is that either you're pulling blocks from, again, some disorganized kind of list of project drawings, or you're drawing the blocks manually each time you do a new project, which would also be a good way to slow you down. That kind of idea. Okay, so kind of pushing you in the direction of kind of building your own block library, such that you can kind of recall them, speed yourself up, get you kind of organized. Okay. So that's pretty much it for right block. That's the only difference, is that create block will make the block and save it to the current drawing file. Right block will do the same thing, create the block, save it to the drawing file, but it'll also make a separate drawing file with just the block included. Okay. So
What's that under there again? For creating block?
under the Insert tab, and then Block Definition.
Oh,
So
okay, and then
insert,
create block. Okay.
yeah, instead of Create Block, we've switched to Right Block.
Okay. Now, if we're
Yeah,
creating a block, is it like we draw what we want and then highlight it and hit create block, or we have to go create block first?
draw what you want first. When you choose Create Block, you have to select the objects that are included in the block. So the whatever is going to be included in the block, whatever symbols, circles, lines, anything like that, have to be drawn first before hitting Create Block.
Okay.
So again, yeah, if I make like a symbol, like just a standard circle with a line through it here, when I go to Create Block, it's going to ask me in this window to specify the objects. So I have to have the objects on screen first before I can make the block. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about right block at all? Okay. If not, let's carry on here. So next kind of little subsection here is about editing blocks. So let's say I'm making my fuse symbol here, and I'm just going to steal this one and explode it to kind of simulate drawing it out because I'm lazy and I don't want to redraw this. So I have my objects here, and let's say I accidentally made my lines a bit improper on this fuse, but I went ahead and I was in a bit of a rush and I created this block anyways. So this is my fuse symbol. It's not correct, but I'm going to make it into a block anyway. So let's create this. I'll call it fuse 2 because there's already a fuse block on here. We'll select the base point, select the objects that are included in the block, hit enter, and I'm just going to leave the rest of the settings as is. So now I have a block, a fuse block, and I made it incorrectly. Okay, so how do I now go in there and fix this? So in order to fix a block or edit it in any way, luckily for us, we have a block editor command as well. Okay, so there's two ways to get to the block editor. We can either go to the Insert tab in the top left, same place as all our other block definition and block functions are. So Insert tab again, under Block Definition, on the far right here of the block definition panel, we have Block Editor. So I can click on Block Editor, and it'll give me a little window asking me which block specifically I want to edit. And I have a list of every block that's included in this drawing file. So I have those contacts again, the circuit breaker, the fuses, the fuse 2 I made, which had that error in it, our motor symbols in here. We get a preview of what that block is as well. So all of my blocks are listed here. So I just have to choose the one that I want to edit out of this list. In this case, that's fuse 2. That's the one I made the error on. By choosing fuse 2, we hit OK. And that will enter me into the block editor menu. Okay. So the block editor looks kind of weird. It has this gray background instead of kind of the standard dark AutoCAD background, the kind of dark bluish. So that's just an indicator that you are in the block editor. We also get this block editor ribbon up here. That has a few controls for editing blocks. We're not highly concerned with a lot of those. What I need to do when editing this block, if I want to move that line back over to its correct position, I just have to go back to my Home tab and back to my drawing and editing tools. So I can use my drawing and editing tools, draw or modify here, and I can use these tools just like as if I was on the drawing window. So I could take my line tool, I can draw right on here. If I want to draw it again here, I believe it's 1 unit. And I can draw that line back in. And I can use any of my modify tools. I can erase it. I can use my trim tool to trim out that middle line. Whatever I need to do. You can still use your draw or modify commands. It works just the same as the drawing window, the standard drawing window does. Okay, I can add text in here if I wanted. I could put dimensions in here. It works just like the standard drawing window. Okay, so I made that little error where my line was too far to the right here. I could use the grips and bring it back. That wasn't quite right. That should be 1.5. Or maybe not. Let's take it this side. There we go. I could use the grips to move it back. I can do whatever I want to edit this. Okay. I could trim out the center. I can draw circles in. All works just the same as the drawing window does. Okay. So let's say I'm just going to cut off this terminal end on here. And for some reason, I want my fuse symbol to look like this. We can make whatever changes. And then on the top left, we have save block. And on the far right, we have close the block editor. So I can save the block on the top left here. I've made my changes, all my edits. I'll hit save block. And then when I'm done all my edits, I need to leave this block editor. I just hit the block, close block editor button as well. Okay. And by hitting that, now I've returned back to my drawing window. And if I go into my gallery, I can see Fuse 2 has updated. I've chopped off the left terminal on this, and I've also moved over one of those center lines. Okay. A quicker way to get into the block editor as well, if you don't want to go through the insert and then block editor here, you can just double click on any block. So if I double click on this block, it'll send me to the edit block definition as well. So double left click also sends me to the block editor. Okay. One other kind of important part of block editor is being able to change the base point as well. So since I chopped off that left terminal, now my base point is just kind of hanging in midair. And that base point isn't really all that useful to me as it currently stands. If I want to insert this into a diagram, I probably want the insertion point to be sticking on a quadrant of the terminal, just so I can easily grab it from the library and then place it on the wiring diagram. So In order to change the base point as well, I just have to go back into my block editor. And this little palette that it gives me here, under the parameters tab, it has a section for base point. Okay. So this authoring palette, if this disappears, if you accidentally close it, it's just this authoring palette button in the top center under the manage panel. So if I open that authoring palettes button, we get base point in here. And by selecting that and then choosing anywhere on the symbol, will reset where my base point is. Okay. So I can do whatever edits I want. I can also change the base point, just selecting base point from the palette. I'll choose this east quadrant of this circle. I get a little kind of point or node symbol there for the new base point. I'll save the block and I'll close the block editor. And now my base point has been moved to that east quadrant of that circle. Okay. So that's the main kind of two things with block editor is either changing the lines itself, just go back to the home tab, use your draw tools or your modify tools as usual to change those lines. Or if you need to change the base point, that's the other kind of main definition of the block. You can just use that palette, select base point, and then choose the new base point on the symbol. Okay. Couple notes on editing blocks as well is if I have pre-existing other instances of that block. So if I say take this fuse block and I'm just going to put a bunch down. If I edit one of these fuse blocks, all of the fuse blocks update in the same way. Okay. So since they're all defined by the same name in my block library, they're all called fuse, they're all the fuse block. If I edit one of these, all of the other blocks will also update. So if I then take this fuse block, or let's take fuse 2 over here, and just make a bunch of them. If I go and edit one of them, again, double clicking on the block, if you want the quicker way, choose it out of the list and hit OK. And I go to edit this. So I'm going to reattach this terminal onto the left side. So just reattaching that back where it was, just using my simple drawing modifying tools to draw those lines back in. I'll go back to my block editor, save the block. It'll mention that there are other existing block references. So there's other blocks in the drawing file that exist, and it's letting me know that those will also be updated. So I'll hit save the changes. This will update all of those blocks. And when I close the block editor, now every instance of that fuse 2 block has been updated the same way. So I edited one block, all blocks under that same name also get updated. Okay. It didn't change the regular fuse at all because that's under a different name. I edited one instance of fuse 2, so all of the other blocks under the name fuse 2 also update in the same way. Okay. And just to prove that, if I put in a bunch of these regular fuses in here and go ahead and edit this again, and let's just trim it up here. Let's trim up this top half. Back to my block editor, save and close. Now all those fuse 2s have updated again. They all get changed at the same time. And these fuse 1s are still as they are. Okay. And that updates in the library as well, the gallery. Fuse is still the same. Fuse 2 was the one I edited, so all instances of fuse 2 update as well. Okay. So if then I want to update just one instance of this block. So say I want to leave all of these fuse 2s as they are, and I want to make a new block that looks like normal fuse does, but I only want to update one of them. I don't want all of the fuses under the fuse 2 name to update. Simply put, there's not really a way to do that. The more complicated way is that I could explode this block, break it back into its components, and then rebuild the block as needed. Giving me trouble with the tracking there. So let's rebuild the block. Okay, now I want to update this block, but not all the other ones. I pretty much am just breaking it down back into the objects and then redefining it under a different name. So I'll take this, go back, create block, and call this one fuse 3 instead. Select the objects again, hit OK, and now I have a new defined fuse, fuse 2, and fuse 3. Okay, so there's no real good way of updating just one block. It has to be under a different name. So I have to explode it, make my edits, and then create it again as a new block under a new name in order to change just this one out of the entire group of them out of here. Okay. If I were to edit this, let's trim out all the center here. Let's explode this and then create block. Let me just double check here. Okay. So if I try to make a new block and use the name of a block that already exists, so for example, we have fuse, fuse 2, fuse 3. We have fuse 3, which looks like the regular fuse, but the kind of innards here are missing. We have fuse 2, but the top side is kind of missing here. If I take this set of objects and try to, let's remove a bunch more stuff. We're just going to take these 3 objects here. And if I save this group of objects under the same name as a block that exists, it's also going to replace all of the blocks that exist on my drawing. So if I create this block and I call this fuse 2, recall that this one on the left here, this just bottom side of the fuse, is called fuse 2. If I use this set of objects and also name it fuse 2 and hit OK, then it's going to ask me if I want to redefine the blocks. And if I say yes, it's going to update all of those blocks to the new block definition. Okay, so this is just kind of a lot of different methods of saying that the blocks themselves are saved under that name. If you reuse that name, then you're redefining the block. That name is saved to that block definition. Okay. So if I change one block, it's going to change all the other blocks under the same name. If I try to make a block under the name of a block that exists, then I'm redefining the blocks that exist on my drawing already. Okay. So that's kind of, again, 2 different ways of saying that blocks are associated with their own name. If you try to use the same name twice, it's going to cross its wires and then use a different block definition. Okay. One last thing with the block editor here as well is that this is kind of beyond the scope of the course, but I'll just mention it for those of you that are curious. If actually, let's take the fuse. If I take this fuse here and go into my block editor, so here I am just with my standard fuse symbol, and I'm back in the block editor again. This block authoring palette that comes with the block editor, this actually also holds the controls for creating dynamic blocks. So if you are curious about creating dynamic blocks, we've talked about in the past about how to kind of manipulate dynamic blocks, how to use their different grips. If you want to create your own, the authoring palette here in the block editor is actually for that purpose as well. So in here, you can see that we have those kind of familiar grips, linear for lengthening or stretching. We have our point just for moving. There's our rotation, alignment, flip. All those same grips that were in the dynamic blocks are in here as well. So this is where you go to actually create those dynamic blocks. So for example, if I want this fuse to be able to stretch, again, this is beyond the scope of the course, just for those of you that are curious about creating dynamic blocks. This is just kind of how you do it. We have two main kind of tabs here, parameters and actions. Parameters is going to give us kind of a dimension for where on the block specifically we want this action to happen. So either a stretch or a rotation, where exactly do I want that grip? So I'll choose linear just as an example here. We're going to make this fuse capable of stretching. Okay. So I'll set up the parameter. We want this fuse to be able to stretch. So I've left the distance here defined by the rectangle because we want the rectangle to lengthen. Okay. Then in actions, this is the actual kind of modify command in the background. So in this case, I want to pull stretch. It's going to ask me for what parameter do I want to stretch in this case. We have this distance one dimension, so that's the one I'm going to use. And then it asks me to specify the parameter point to associate with the action. That's which one of these grips do I want to use. I'll use the right one. And then it wants me to actually specify the stretch command. So works just like the actual stretch command does. Anything that crosses the crossing window will be stretched. Anything inside the crossing window is moved, and anything outside of the crossing window stays the same. Okay. So I want it to stretch these two lines here, these two horizontal lines of the rectangle, but I want everything else to just kind of move. I don't want any other lines stretching, just these two horizontal lines here. So I'll make my crossing window look like this, with everything that I want to move is staying inside. These two are being stretched, so they cross the window, and then everything to the left is just being left as it is. Then it wants me to select the objects, so select all the objects that are involved. Hit Save Block. Close the block editor. And if I'm lucky here, you change the definition a little bit. Okay, I think we're good. Now we have that stretch grip, and now I can stretch my fuse. Okay, so again, not highly critical at all to our purposes, but if you are curious about how to create dynamic blocks, I do recommend go into the block editor and just play around with a bunch of these parameters and actions and just get a feel for how some of them work. Again, perfectly up to you. It's not required for this course at all, but if you want to try it out, then this is kind of where you go to make your dynamic blocks as well. Okay, so I set up the parameter. What exactly is the dimension that I want to change? dimension was this distance. I want to change the distance of this line. We made it into a stretch command, selecting the specific dimension that's going to be changed, this distance that I defined. We use the stretch command. Oops, skipped a step there. Select the distance, select the point to associate with the action, so the grip point, and using the stretch command as it just generally works. Anything that crosses gets stretched, anything inside moves, anything outside stays the same. Select the objects that are associated with that action and hit enter. Okay. Save the block, close the block editor, and now my block should be stretchable. Okay. Just play around with it if you're interested. If you're not interested, no big deal. It's not required for this course at all, but just as a bit of a heads up. Okay. Any questions about editing blocks at all?
I have a question here.
Yep.
So if you create a block and mistakenly give it like a wrong name, is there any way to like edit the name, only the name, or you have to recreate the block? Is that
Okay. So, for example, I get what you mean. If you just change the name is wrong only. So if I take this block and let's create it, and I give it the wrong name, I accidentally make a typo and it's called fuse T. And I made that mistake. It's now called fuse T. If I want to rename this block, I can't exactly rename it. There's no easy way of me just kind of, with other programs, like just on your desktop, you can right click a file and then rename. Can't do that in AutoCAD. It's a bit more difficult. So in AutoCAD, which actually segues into my next little section here, is that if I make a block by accident, like let's say this sample 2 here, and I don't want that block anymore, or I have this fuse T, I made the typo on the name, and now how do I get rid of that block? Okay, so I can't rename it. We're stuck with this fuse T, and I put the base point somewhere weird, so it disappeared on me. Let's just move that over. There we go. Okay, so I made this block. I accidentally gave it the wrong name, or I made a block. It's completely messed up and I just want to start over. I just want to get rid of it. In order to do that, I have to use the purge command. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit last Tuesday, but in order to get rid of it, I have to purge it. So if I go to the Manage tab on the top of my ribbon, Manage, and then over at Cleanup, we have Purge. So select Purge here. We get a window for purgeable items. Again, Manage, and then Cleanup, and then Purge. If I make that typo and it's just the wrong name, the simple fact of it is I just have to delete the block. You could keep it around, save it as the just individual objects. So I could take it, let's say I made this fuse, it's correctly drawn, I just gave the wrong name. I could then explode this and just keep the objects, and then go into the gallery and actually delete the block, and then recreate it again. So I've exploded the block just so I can keep those parts. I've already drawn it. I don't want to draw it again. I'll keep these parts here. We'll go to Manage, Purge. In the Purge menu, we have 2 categories, purgeable items and non-purgeable items. Purgeable items, what kind of constitutes whether things are purgeable or non-purgeable? And Purgeable meaning deletable from the drawing file itself, so whether it's able to be deleted or not, is whether it exists on the drawing file or not. So if it exists somewhere on the drawing file, I can't purge it. I have to first remove it from the drawing, and then it becomes purgeable. So in this case, under my blocks, I have my fuse T here. It is now purgeable because I exploded it on my drawing window. It's no longer a block that exists on my window. So I'm capable of purging it. It's under purgeable items. If I was going to insert this back, fuse T again, here's fuse T, and it's back in my drawing. And I go to purge. Now fuse T is missing from my list. It now exists on the drawing file, so I can no longer purge it. Okay. If I go to find non-purgeable items, now fuse T is in this list. So fuse T exists on the drawing file. It is now non-purgeable. Easy way to find it as well. Let's say I have that block somewhere on my drawing, and I want to turn it into a purgeable item, but I don't know where it is. So if I go to my purge menu again, the block exists on the drawing somewhere. I don't know where, but it does exist, so it's not purgeable. So I'll go to find non-purgeable items. Fuse T is in this list. It's non-purgeable. It exists on the drawing. On the details section on this right side, we have some info about where that is. So first we have block insertions. So we have one insertion of this block, so one instance or one fuse T somewhere on this drawing, and it's letting me know that that block is on layer 0. Okay, so I could shut down all my layers and just look on layer 0. Maybe it's a bit easier to find it that way, but conveniently as well, it's also on this select objects button. It's a little blue square with a magnifying glass. If I click on that button, that zooms me right into where it is. Okay. So then I can find it. We can delete it from the drawing. Go back to purge, find it in the list here. Now fuse T is purgeable. Okay. I can then take fuse T. In this list, we can check mark anything that we want to delete. I only want to delete fuse T, so it's going to be the only one that I'm going to check mark here. And then I'm going to select purge checked items. Okay. So if I purge the checked items, it should purge fuse T from my drawing. It'll ask me just to verify. I'll hit purge this item. And now if I go back to my insert gallery, fuse T is gone. So then I could go back. I still have the objects here because I exploded it beforehand. I still have the objects here. I could then go to insert, create block, and then give it the proper name. I'll call this sample fuse as the proper name. Give it its base point. Select the objects, and then hit OK. And now I have the block again. Okay, so bit convoluted, have to go through some extra steps. I can't just rename it really. If you purge it and then just rebuild it, it's probably the simplest way to get back to where you were. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's also an intro into Purge. A couple other things about Purge as well is that in this list here, again, purgeable items means it exists somewhere. Non-purgeable means it doesn't exist, or rather vice versa. Purgeable means it doesn't exist on the drawing file. Non-purgeable means it does exist on the drawing file. So in here is all my symbols that I used for assignment 5. They're all non-purgeable because they're on the drawing file itself. The other button here we have, instead of purge checked items, we also have purge all. This is a good way, but also kind of a risky way to remove everything that isn't being used by your drawing file. So in this purge menu, we don't only have blocks. So there's a bunch of blocks in here of the ones I kind of messed around with and I'm not currently using. We also have dimension styles. So this ISO 25 for dimension style. There's line types in here for dashed lines. We have text styles if there's specific fonts. We can also choose Purge All on this menu. Purge All is going to get rid of everything on the drawing file that's not in use. So that's all the dimension styles that aren't being used, all the blocks that aren't being used, everything that isn't being used will be removed from the drawing file. So it's a good way to clean up your drawing because it'll remove all those unnecessary pieces of information, layers, blocks, anything that isn't being used. It's a good way to clean up and minimize the file size of the drawing, but it's also a little bit risky in the sense that you're just deleting everything. It might accidentally grab something that you kind of planned to use but didn't use right now. So there's a bit of a hitch there, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind. If you're very diligent in making sure that you've used all the things you're supposed to use and you're very confident in your final drawing product, then your last step could be to purge all, and it'll just remove everything that's not in use. Okay, so in my gallery here, we have a bunch of blocks that I was messing around with. We're not using them. This Fuse 2, Fuse 3, Sample 2. There's a few other ones as well. We weren't using them at all. I can go to Manage, Purge, and just get rid of those blocks specifically. Purge the checked items, purge all checked items. And now my gallery is nice and cleaned up. It's just including the blocks that are in my drawing file. Okay. So kept all the blocks that are in my legend because they're in use. They're still being used. But it cleaned up all those ones I wasn't using. Okay. So if you ever want to start over on a block, or you made a typo in the name, anything like that, then the block has to be purged in order to be removed from the drawing file. So it has to be purged to be removed, and then you have to redefine or recreate the block. Okay. One last thing as well is one other button that might be helpful is also under Manage. So under the Manage tab, there's a cleanup panel, same place that we grabbed Purge from. There's also this Overkill button. So it sounds dangerous. It's not as dangerous as it sounds. But Overkill will remove any overlapping lines on your drawing. So if I accidentally, maybe I accidentally drew this line in twice between my starter coil and my OL contact here. So there's two lines here, and they're overlapping. What Overkill will do is that if I select an area for it to look for, so where those two lines are overlapping, hit enter, it's going to remove any overlapping lines. So there are some cases when you're making a drawing, especially I found in some cases for your assignment 4, when you make those layout grids, in some cases there were some overlapping lines. It wasn't a big deal or anything. But if you do, again, just want to clean up your drawing to make sure there isn't weird scenarios where you have overlapping lines, maybe I accidentally drew the same line twice by drawing it in first and then you made an offset that just happened to line up, something like that, we can use Overkill to remove those duplicate lines. So there's two lines overlapping here. I selected the area using Overkill and just hitting OK here. Now I'm back to just one line. Okay, so it's going to detect any two lines that overlap. And if it sees two lines that overlap, it's going to purge one of them. Okay, so it's kind of like a debugging thing almost for duplicate versions, like kind of like if you buy something on your credit card and you buy two things from the same vendor for approximately the same price. Sometimes your credit card flags it and says, hey, maybe they accidentally double charged you for this. Same kind of idea. So it's a method to kind of check, hey, maybe you accidentally did draw two lines overlapping on each other, or maybe that was intended. Who knows? It's just kind of flagging those and then purging one of them just to clean up the drawing again. Okay?
Hey, Brent.
Yep.
So I think one time we were talking about like drawing extra lines in instead of using snaps. Like if you want to
Yeah.
like add a long line segment and you want to maybe draw in overlapping lines to get snaps a little easier or something like that. Would that be a good tool using Overkill to remove those after? Is that a good example?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you do try to divide up a line in that way, I get what you mean. If you kind of make, let's say, a 7-unit line, or even better, let's use the fuse. So here's my fuse symbol. This is very applicable, at least to assignment 5. If I explode this, and let's say I'm at this point of drawing my fuse, I drew the two circles, I drew the rectangle and the little connectors here. Now I'm going in and drawing those two inner lines. The kind of more elegant way of doing it would be to use object snap tracking. So tracking that point and then going across, typing 1, and then creating that line. Then I don't have any overlapping lines. The alternate way would be to draw a 1-unit line and then go up 2 units. Same with the other side, go over 1 unit and then up 2. But doing this slightly lazier, I suppose, method results in these overlapping lines here. So exactly, great point. This would be a great case where you could use Overkill. So I could go to Manage, Overkill, select the whole symbol, hit Enter, press OK, and now it's removed those duplicate lines for me. Okay, so I used that 1-unit line, that 1-unit horizontal line, just to give me a grip point to make the vertical line, but it resulted in overlapping lines. So Overkill would be a great use to kind of purge those as well. Yeah, great point. Okay. Any other questions about purging? Okay. Last note about purging, it also works with arcs and circles. So if I maybe have two overlapping circles here, or a circle and an arc. Oops. So I have an arc in this top left quadrant here, and I also have a circle. Overkill also detects these. I can select these objects, hit enter, press OK, and that overlapping arc is now gone. Same with this circle, it had two circles on top of each other. It purged them both, or purged the one that was overlapping. Okay. In the Overkill menu, you can kind of take a look through it a little bit as well. There's a tolerance that it's looking for. This is set to millionths of a unit. So it's using that precision to detect how overlapping those objects are. What's the tolerance that they have to be overlapping? Do they have to be exact? If this was set to 0, they'd have to be exactly overlapping objects. If it's set to 0.1, then two lines only 0.1 out might be detected as overlapping. Okay, so there's a bit of a tolerance here as well about what degree of overlap is between the two objects. You can also ignore certain properties like color or layer. If they're on the same layer, then maybe don't purge them. If they're the same color, that kind of idea. Or if they're different colors, rather, different colors or different layers, then leave them alone. So I'll leave that for you guys to play around with a little bit if you choose to do so. Again, all the stuff today is just kind of extra info. It's not really necessary for anything with our scope of this course, but it's extra info just in case you choose to use it. Okay. Okay. Any final questions about anything today? Okay. So I'll quickly go through 12A and 12B. That's just the last thing on our docket for today. So I'll quickly go through those and then we'll carry on here. Okay, so let me go back. Oh, right, one last thing as well before I get carried away here. So I've redrawn Extra Practice 3 here. There's one little section as well under dimensioning that mentions center lines. So we'll talk about center lines just a little bit. It's pretty simple. So I'll just briefly go over that and then I'll get into 12A and 12B. So back on dimensions, the one thing I skipped from Thursday was center lines. They weren't necessary at all for assignment 5, so I left them for this week. But we'll talk about them just a little bit today. So in my annotate tab on my Centerlines panel, we also have Centermark and Centerline. So these are kind of adjacent to dimensions. Centermark and Centerline are going to help either the reader or maybe anyone that uses your drawing, or if you're using someone else's drawing. It kind of helps identify where the center point of some circles may be. A great example of this is one that you guys brought up a few weeks back with Extra Practice 3. So I just have Extra Practice 3 open here. That was this guy. Some of you guys were curious about how to draw this. We kind of talked about it a little bit, so I'm going to use that as an example. On Extra Practice 3, we have these center lines kind of indicated. So that's the last kind of portion of dimensioning. These center lines are just to help the reader or the draftsperson identify that the center point is in a specific position of an arc or of a circle. So by looking at Extra Practice 3 here, I can tell, obviously, of course, the center point of this circle, this diameter 50 hole, is right in the center of the circle, but also importantly, these extension lines that come out from that center point, up and down and left and right, since these cross this external arc here on the left, that's indicating to me that the center point of that arc is also the center point of the circle. Okay, so this radius is 0.75 is centered at the same position as this diameter 0.5 because those lines extend through both arcs or both circles. So I've just pre-drawn Extra Practice 3 here. Center marks, we just have to select center mark from the Centerline panel. It's going to ask us to select an arc or a circle to add a center mark. I'll choose this left one that we were pointing at earlier. Same one over here. Diameter 0.50, radius 0.75. They share the same center point because that line crosses through both. I'll select the circle, and it automatically creates the center mark for me. Okay, so I can do the same thing as was in the extra practice here. I can go through and put a center mark on every circle. Let's just continue on and put one on every circle here. So we got center marks. Couple things to mention about center marks as well. First thing is it's automatically sized to the size of the circle. So you can see that this one with the largest circle in the middle, it's automatically sized it to be larger than the ones for the smaller holes. So they're automatically sized in that way. And what comes with that is that they are now associated to the circle they were made on. So if I take this circle and move it somewhere else, the center lines should come with the circle. So if I grab it by its center grip and move it around, I'm not selecting the center lines at all, but it's still coming with the circle. So they're now associated with each other. Okay. If I try to increase or decrease the size of the circle, the center lines also respond to those size increases or changes. Okay. So they're now associative to each other. The center lines are associative to the circle. Kind of like with a array, if I change anything about the array, all the other objects in that array also change if they are all associative. Okay. So let's go back here. Secondly, on top of the center lines being associative, they also have grip points. So if I select any center line, I can change the layer of the center line if I want. It doesn't have to be on the same layer as the circle. And these grips will allow me to extend the extension lines of the center line itself. So I can grab these grips. The square grip is associated with the diameter or radius. The little arrow grip is just the extension line that goes beyond that. So it's just giving you two different grip points. They're not really strict on what they're really for. They're just to kind of move it around. So I can grab the square grip, move it up to the top here, where it intersects with the other quadrant of the larger arc. Moving these grips around here and just extending them. And then that arrow portion is just the extension that kind of sticks out the end to show that it's still a dimension line. If this meets with the end here, I kind of bring it back. If it meets with the end, then we kind of cross into that confusion area of, is that a dimension center line or is it part of the actual object itself? So that's the only reason it sticks out a little bit here from the edges, is just to help clarify that it is in fact a center line, not part of the object itself. Okay. So that's the only reason it kind of extends out a little bit. We can change the amount of extension using the arrow, so I can extend it more or extend it less. Now, these dimension center lines don't have to be precise in any way. They're just to show where the center points are. So they're not part of the object. They're not really imperative to someone designing this or building this object. It's just kind of extra visual clarity of where those center points are. So the amount of extension these branches or these extension lines have isn't really a big deal. So I can go back and kind of copy what's here. We have extension lines through these arcs, so I know all these radii pointing here are centered on that same center point. This next small hole, you can see it just crosses a small hole. It doesn't cross any other arcs, so it's just associated with that small hole. The largest circle in the center has the extension line going all the way up to the top here into this top arc. So I know this arc and this center circle share the same center point, okay? As well as this bottom arc down here, because the line passes through. We know this arc is also associated with that center point, okay? Same with this first circle to the right. It just goes through that one circle, so it's just the center point for that circle, whereas the one on the far right extends through the far right arc as well as through the circle, so they share the same center point. Okay. So I can kind of do the same here, just quickly. I'll extend these a little bit just to kind of match the drawing. Actually, that one can stay. This one will come down. These also make a good extension or grip points for dimensions. So you can see that these ones have been matched in height, just like in this drawing here, such that they can put a dimension in here and kind of match them up as well. Okay, so they could take a dimension. They could use the ends if they wanted. Or they could use the full center point. But it gives you a few extra grips if you choose. And just going through, extending all these to the same kind of quadrant that they're associated to. This one stays because it's not passing through anything that's associated. This one can go through those quadrants. And if there's a quadrant up here, maybe not. We could extend it anyways, just so that they're all equal, approximately. This one's about 1 unit. Could do this one at 1 unit as well. Okay. Something like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to show the center points of those shapes. Same thing with rectangles. We also have under center lines, we could do center lines of rectangles as well. And that's just to show where the midpoint of the rectangle is. Again, it can extend out, or we could move it. And that's just to show where the center of the rectangle is. Okay. Center mark, center line. Again, this is also left to today because you don't need this for any of our assignments. But in the case that you do run into the case where you do need center lines, this is just kind of how you do it as well. Okay.
Hey, Brent.
Yep.
Random question for you.
Sure.
I accidentally closed my entire toolbar at the top.
Okay.
How do I get that back?
Okay. So, do you still see the tabs up here called annotate, insert, home? All of those are still there?
I have file, edit, view, insert, format, tools, the one above that, basically.
Okay, you have the quick access up there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'll double check real quick and I'll get back to you in just a minute. Okay.
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 Second question.
Yeah.
How do we get out of editing blocks?
There should be on the right, you don't have a ribbon, hey?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a little stuck.
So I'll bring your ribbon back first and then you'll be
Okay.
able to close the block editor.
You're the best.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions before I kind of let you loose here? Okay, there's no questions. It's just kind of free period if you guys want to work on any assignments and ask any questions. If you want to leave a little early, I have no problems with that either. But I'll stick around until 7:50 as per usual, give or take, and answer any questions if you have any on the assignments. Okay? And I will look into getting your ribbon back there, Brooke.
I figured it out. I just got it.
Oh, yep.
It's tools,
Okay.
palettes, ribbon. Once you called it ribbon, I was able to find it.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure what extent of how much stuff you were missing, so but yeah. Okay, glad to hear
Yeah,
it's
I tend to break things.
fixed. Yep, see you, Jared. No problem, Roberto. See ya.
Hey, Brent.
Yep.
Quick question. Would it be possible to get like a quick synopsis on assignment number 5 again? I'm just
Yeah,
reading
sure.
some of the instructions, and maybe it'd be good to go over it again one more time.
Sure, no problem. Okay, let me pull up the PDF. Okay. So, share my screen here. Okay. So for assignment 5, you're going to be creating a motor control schematic. The main things that this assignment is looking for is just the things that we've kind of covered last week, which is either blocks or dimensions. Those are the main two things that we're looking at. So to kind of go through the procedure here, you're going to use the drawing file, ENGD 238, assignment 5. That's also in the week 9 folder here, week 9 and 10. It's the only things in here really, assignment 5 PDF and assignment 5 drawing. So assignment 5 drawing, that looks like this. So you should have a blank kind of set of boxes here. You're going to create a motor control schematic as well as the symbols included. So it's kind of in a way like assignment 3, where assignment 3 you made that symbol legend where those symbols were already provided for you. You just had to place them on the grid, give them the name, array out the text, that kind of deal. In this case, you're also making a symbol legend, but you aren't given the symbols. You have to make them yourself. Okay? So, in part A here, that's all about creating the symbols. So draw the 10 schematic symbols attached to this document on layer 0. Use the symbol dimensions provided. So if I scroll down in this PDF, we have some samples of the symbol legend. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, we have the actual symbol legend with dimensions. So this is what you're going to be imitating. So first you have to go through and draw each of these symbols. We have the fuse, stop, start buttons, different contacts, switch, circuit breaker. You're going to be designing, drawing each of these symbols on your assignment 5 drawing. So you'll go through, make your fuses. As a bit of an example here. I believe this is 2. There we go. Too many grips available to me here. Let's turn off a bunch. So draw your symbols just as kind of is here. Okay, so there's my simple fuse there. So you'll draw them out, and then I also want them turned into blocks. So if I go back to the description here, I've done this according to the exact dimensions. Following all these dimensions here, the circles should be radius 1, the distances here. This inner distance is 2.5. The outer distance, or the total length of this rectangle, is 4.5. Some of the dimensions aren't listed. You're going to have to kind of figure them out just by analyzing the symbol itself. So if I'm thinking, how long are these lines between the quadrant of this circle to the midpoint of this rectangle? Maybe there's a good way to do that. Maybe there's a way to math it out. It's up to you. As long as it's to the correct dimensions, it should look fairly similar to what's in the legend here. Once you've made the symbols, so for example, my fuse that I just drew, you'll go back here. So draw the 10 schematic symbols. I've just drawn the first one out. Save each symbol as a simple block. So I'll go back, turn this into a block now. We want it named what it's supposed to be in the symbol legend. So save each symbol as a simple block. When naming the schematic blocks, use the 10 names provided in the symbol legend. So since I just drew the fuse, I want to double check the symbol legend. It's called a fuse, all caps. Let's call it fuse in all caps. Create that block. And now we have our fuse block. Okay, so now we've saved it. We've named it using the correct name. All created blocks should be visible and available in the gallery. So I can double check that. In my insert gallery, there's fuse. Looks good. So it's a block. It's saved to the drawing. It shows up in my gallery. And then once you've done all 10, turn them into blocks. This is just saying to save your drawing file, just to make sure that you have the right format. Your name, motor control schematic, same as all the other assignments. Your name, and then the assignment. That's just a good checkpoint to kind of save your work. The part B of it is to actually make the motor control schematic itself. So you've made all the symbols. Now you need to make the diagram. So I've gone through, made my symbol legend. I have all the symbols. I put the names here. Now I need to draw this symbol legend. So I'll draw it out as it's written here. There's some text, so I'm going to have to include some text. There's these little C's, T1, T2, T3 for the different terminals here. So I'm going to have to include that text. Anything that's shown in this motor control schematic here, anything in this box, I'm going to have to include into my motor control schematic. These little 101, 102, 103 for the different ladder diagram rung numbers. I need to include those. Put in the symbols. You've already made the blocks, so it should be easy to kind of copy them over into the motor control schematic, draw it as is. Now, the thing with the motor control schematic is that there are some dimensions listed, but the ones that aren't listed, I'm not going to be very picky about. So it shows here for dimensions, these different lines should be 15 units apart. So line 1 to line 2, line 3, 15 units apart. That should be fairly consistent. You'll also include this dimension in your motor control schematic. Same with where it says 20 units between the different ladder rungs here. Those should be consistent. Same with this 110. If it's something like the distance between the disconnect switch to the circuit breaker, what is the distance between this circle to this circle? Since it's not specified, I'm not very strict about it. The main thing is that your text shouldn't be so close that your text overlaps, or they shouldn't be so close that the two symbols overlap. It should be generally organized, but I'm not going to be raking you over coals if this is 52 units when it was supposed to be 50 units or something like that. It's not specified, and it's a electrical wiring diagram. No one's going to build this as it's shown here. This is like a preliminary drawing. No one's going to take this and then immediately go build it. There has to be more details to it, like the dimensions of the motor, specific line lengths, maybe in the wall. Those aren't included here, so I'm not going to be specific about them either. Last thing is you've made your motor control schematic, your symbol legend. You'll include all of the dimensions on here as well. So where it says 4.5 for the width dimension here, that's not just for your reference. you'll also include that in your drawing. So if I open up the sample here for assignment 5, you can see that they've also included all the dimensions. It's not just for your reference, you're also drawing these dimensions in, just using the standard dimension tools. Either the dimension button or the more specific dimensions, kind of smaller button, to draw your dimensions in. The dimensions should look like, just like in the example as well, should look similar using the same dimensions. So if this uses a distance from center to endpoint and a radius, then include the same dimensions. And at that point, you've included all the dimensions, you have your motor control schematic, you have your symbol legend, all of that's done. There's one last thing to do, and that's to convert it into PDF files. So this one's a little bit different. Going through procedure part B here and into the deliverables, you've made your symbols from part A, you've created the motor control schematic. There's a little note here about layers. Your schematic should be on layer 0. Dimensions should be on the dimensions layer. Any dashed lines should be on the dashed line layer. Finally here, for deliverables, you have 3 files to submit. So unlike assignment 3 or 2, 3, and 4, where it was just the drawing file and a PDF and you're good to go, I actually want 2 different PDFs here. So you're still submitting the drawing file itself, but I want 2 PDFs. One of them is the entire motor control schematic drawing, but without dimensions. So do not print dimensions on this PDF. And the other one here is your name, symbols, and dimensions. This one is a window print from the model space showing the symbols and dimensions. So to kind of visualize this as well, this very first page of the sample PDFs, so right after deliverables into the samples, this first drawing here should resemble your motor control schematic without dimensions. The second slide here, the second page, should resemble your drawing. So the first one is the PDF, no dimensions. Second one should be what your drawing looks like. And the third one is the window print of the symbol legend with dimensions. So in order to do a window print, the last thing there is that the window print, when you go to print and plot, normally with the other assignments, you'd go to a layout and just go print plot, and you're good to go. You just hit OK from the layout. With this one, I want it from the model space, and instead you'll do a window print. So going to print and then plot. Since we're on the model space, it hasn't predefined a bunch of stuff for us. So we have to go in and do some stuff manually as well. So the first thing we want to do is specify the printer plotter. This is the software or the printer or fax machine that's going to actually print or plot our drawing file. In this case, we're going to use DWG to PDF.pc3. The instructions for the window plot, I've also posted an announcement if you just need to re-reference them. But DWG to PDF.pc3. Plot area, instead of the display, we want a window because we're doing a window print. Drawing a box over the symbol legend because that's the window that we want to print. And let me do this on this one, just so it's a bit more obvious. Print, drawing to DWG to PDF.pc3. Window print around the symbol legend. And the last things here, so we've set the printer plotter. We've set the plot area to window. Last thing is we want to center the plot and we want it to fit to the page. So we can see this little sample here, this little sample drawing of our paper print. If I hit center the plot, you can see that it's now centered to the page. And fitting it to the paper, just make sure it stretches to fit the whole page as well. So these two buttons are just to make sure it fits the page. Window is to select the area. Print plotter is for the actual software that's going to turn this into a PDF. So once you've set those three, you can just hit OK. Save it. And you should get just like in the PDF for the sample. So I got my symbol legend. We've printed it out. Has the dimensions included. It's a window of just the symbol legend. Just like the example here in the assignment 5 sample. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any questions at all? I know I went through it kind of quick.
Oh no, that's perfect. That's it just wasn't clear in my head from last week, so appreciate
Sure.
it.
Yep, no problem.
All right, Brent, you have a good night.
Yep, you too, Mark.
Yeah, you actually answered my question before I could ask it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, about the centering of the window.
Oh, I see, yeah.
All right, I've submitted it, my work already, so I'm done. Let
Sure,
me know if I
sounds
need
good.
to do anything else with it. Assignment
Yep.
5.
I'll take a
Alright.
look at it and let you know.
All right.
See ya. Yep, you too, Joseph. See ya.
Brent?
Yep.
When is the schedule of your next assignment?
Assignment 6 comes out next Tuesday. Assignment 6 is not going to be anything new. Assignment 6 is more of like a mini quiz about everything we've covered up to this point. It's open book, so you don't have to worry about that or anything. It's just like a little mini question, multiple choice questionnaire kind of thing about things we've covered up to this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Brent, the assignment
Yep.
6 is not a drawing.
No, it's not a drawing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. You too, Abdul. Yep, no problem, Mike. See you Thursday.
You know, this transformer looks really lame to draw.
With some clever use of copying and pasting and mirroring, you can save yourself a fair bit of time.
Fair enough.
As a bit of a hint. Yep, no problem, Brody. See you Thursday.
Do you care about the space between the symbols, or does it kind of just make it look neat?
Just make it look neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything specific. Just as long as it's like fairly consistent in the spacing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just make it look neat, and yeah, you're more concerned about like the symbols being exact instead of like everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's more about the blocks and the dimensions, and then just general kind of overarching neatness.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. Any final questions before we pack up for the evening here?
Yeah, I might have one quick one.
Sure.
So I'm trying to snap grid.
Okay.
Like I'm trying to set my grid, and I want to be able to snap like every 15 just to make it like even all the way down nice and quick.
Yeah.
But I can't seem to be able to like it doesn't want to do a snap for 15.
Okay.
It's like giving me like everything.
So you've already gone in. Let me share my screen here. So you've
So it's
already
type-
gone into your grid settings here and set the snap and grid spacing to 15.
I typed in grid and then hit 15.
Okay.
Like,
Make sure
and
the snap is
at
also
5.
15. Yeah.
Okay, so 15. Okay. That's
Okay.
my issue probably.
And if you hit OK, it should update. It's up to you if you want to move the UCS. Kind of like with assignment 3, moving that over just so the grid's aligned.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then you could use each of these intersections to kind of place a symbol. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, there should be enough space.
So how do I grab just that? Oh, there we go. Okay, I got it now. I grabbed it. Okay, perfect. And then okay, I think I got it.
Okay. All good then, or any other questions?
No, that's everything.
Okay. Yeah, if anything comes up, just feel free to email me as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent.
Yep. See you next time.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Bye.